Look, nobody actually enjoys going to the doctor. Not on Earth, not on some spinning metal donut in the middle of space, and definitely not when that doctor has 3 eyes and keeps referring to your internal organs as your squishy bits. But after 3 months hauling cargo containers the size of city buses between stations, Zenith 7's medical protocols didn't care about my feelings. Mandatory health screening, or no more flight clearances. So there I was, sitting on an examination table that was clearly designed for someone with a completely different skeletal structure, trying not to slide off while Dr. Cliven reviewed my file. Dr. Cliven was what humans had started calling a stickler. That wasn't their species' actual name, which sounded like a sneeze in a wind tunnel. But it fit. The sticklers were tall, thin, vaguely mantis-like beings who lived and breathed protocol. They had 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on their narrow heads, and I swear all 3 of them were judging me simultaneously. Human Jake Martinez. Doctor, Cliven said, his voice like someone reading a terms and conditions agreement out loud. Cargo hauler, Class 3 certification, stationed on Zenith 7 for 74 standard cycles. Your file indicates you consume a beverage called coffee in quantities that should be lethal. It's called building a tolerance, end quote. I said, and I'm basically made of coffee at this point. It's fine. Nothing about human biology is fine, Doctor, Cliven muttered, tapping through screens on his datapad. Your species operates on sustained stress and spite. Medical miracle you survive at all. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit it. So, are we doing this, or are you just going to insult my entire species? Because I've got a shipment of Arcturian mood crystals that won't haul themselves, and those things get cranky if they're late. Doctor, Cliven's middle eye twitched, which I'd learned was their version of a resigned sigh. Remove your upper garment. Standard bioscan protocol requires direct dermal access. I pulled off my shirt and immediately saw all 3 of Dr. Cliven's eyes widen. Right. The tattoos. I'd honestly forgotten about them since nobody on Earth bats an eye anymore. But I was currently the only human in a medical bay designed for species that apparently didn't decorate their skin. My right arm had a tribal pattern that wrapped from shoulder to elbow, a decision from my early 20s that seemed really meaningful at the time. Left arm had a dragon, because of course it did. My chest had a compass rose, and my back had a full scene of mountains and stars that had taken 6 sessions and most of my savings when I was 25. What? Dr. Cliven said slowly. Are those markings on your dermis? Tattoos, I said. You know, ink under the skin. Decorative body art. Pretty common on Earth. You have permanently altered your largest organ for aesthetic purposes. Well, when you say it like that, it sounds weird. Doctor, Cliven moved closer, his scanning device hovering near my shoulder. And these patterns, they represent what, exactly? This one's tribal, kind of a traditional design. That one's a dragon because dragons are cool. The compass is because I wanted to remember to always find my way home, and the mountain scene is from a camping trip with my dad before he died. All 3 eyes blinked in sequence. You mark your body to remember your deceased parent. Among other things. Yeah. Fascinating. Disturbing, but fascinating. Dr. Cliven raised his bioscanner, a sleek silver device about the size of a flashlight. This will take only a moment. Standard protocol requires scanning all visible anomalies. They're not anomalies. They're art. From a medical perspective, human Jake, everything about you is an anomaly. Fair enough. I held still while Dr. Cliven waved the scanner over my right arm, starting at the shoulder and working down toward the tribal pattern. The device hummed, pleasantly, a soft blue light washing over my skin. Just another boring medical appointment on just another boring Tuesday, or whatever day it was in station time. I was already thinking about lunch, wondering if the cafeteria was still serving those synthetic tacos that tasted almost right if you didn't think too hard about what was in them. Then the scanner's pleasant hum turned into a sound like a garbage disposal trying to eat a fork. Doctor. Cliven jumped back so fast he nearly tripped over his own legs, all 3 eyes locked on the scanner's display screen. The device was flashing red and making noises I was pretty sure medical equipment was not supposed to make. I said. Is that normal? Dr. Cliven didn't answer. He was staring at his scanner like it had just told him the meaning of life, and he didn't like the answer. This was going to be a long day. The scanner was now making a noise that can only be described as a digital scream. Red lights pulsed across its surface in what I assumed was the alien equivalent of every warning symbol flashing at once. Doctor. Cliven's 3 eyes were locked on the display, his thin fingers trembling slightly as he held the device at arm's length like it might explode. Doc? I said carefully, you're making me nervous. Nervous, Dr. Cliven repeated, his voice climbing an octave. Nervous. You are concerned about nervousness. He turned the scanner around so I could see the display, which was filled with text in about 6 different languages, all of it highlighted in aggressive red. The only part I could read was in English, helpfully translated by the station's AI. Ancient kill marks detected, subject classification, apex predator, threat level, unquantified. I blinked. That's not what that is. The scanner does not lie, human Jake. It has analyzed the pigmentation patterns embedded in your dermis, and cross-referenced them with the Galactic database of warrior species markings. Dr. Cliven was backing toward the folder wall now, putting distance between us. These are kill marks, permanent records of defeated enemies, inscribed on the victor's body as a territorial display. They're tattoos from a place called Ink Nation on 5th Street in Denver. I paid $200 for the dragon. The guy's name was Steve. You named your kill, Dr. Cliven whispered, horrified. What? No. Steve was the tattoo artist. The guy with the needle. The guy who drew the dragon. There's no killing involved, just art and poor financial decisions. But Dr. Cliven wasn't listening anymore. He was tapping frantically at his datapad, his 3 eyes darting between me and the screen. Protocol 77 Gamma requires immediate security notification when predator species characteristics are detected in previously unclassified subjects. I must report this. Report what? That I have a dragon tattoo? You have marked yourself with the image of a mythological apex predator from your homeworld. A creature of such legendary ferocity that your own species created stories about it for thousands of years. Dr. Cliven's voice was shaking now. The scanner indicates at least 14 distinct marking patterns across your visible dermis. 14 kills. Human Jake. You have been operating on this station for 74 cycles while concealing your warrior status. I'm a cargo hauler. I move boxes. The most dangerous thing I've done this month was eating questionable sushi from level 12. The medical bay's door chimed, and I heard the heavy magnetic locks disengage. Oh good. Security. Because that's exactly what this situation needed. Security Chief Rundle oozed into the room. And I do mean oozed. Rundle was a gastropod 7, which meant he looked like someone had given a slug the approximate mass of a small car and a really bad attitude. He left a trail of slime behind him that the station's cleaning bots were constantly complaining about, and he took his job very, very seriously. Dr. Cliven. Rundle's voice bubbled out like someone talking through jello. Explain the predator alert. The human has kill marks, Dr. Cliven said, pointing at me with a trembling finger. Multiple marks. Permanent dermal inscriptions, indicating a warrior classification we were previously unaware of. Rundle's eye stalk swiveled to look at me, which was somehow more intimidating than it should have been. Human Jake. You have been concealing your predator status. I haven't been concealing anything. These are tattoos. Decorative ink, earth culture. We do this for fun. Fun, Rundle repeated slowly. You permanently mark your body with symbols of violence for recreational purposes. When he said it like that, I had to admit it sounded a little weird. Look, it's really common on Earth. Millions of people have tattoos. Probably billions by now. They're just art. Expression. Sometimes we get them to remember things, or people we love. Sometimes we get them because we're drunk and make bad choices. It's not about violence, Rundle turned to Dr. Cliven. How many other humans on this station have these kill marks? I have not scanned them. This is the first human to trigger the Predator protocol. We need to scan them all, Rundle declared. Immediately. If one human has been concealing warrior status, others may be as well. Oh, come on, I said. You're going to drag every human on the station in here because of some ink? Defensive aggression noted, Rundle said to Dr. Cliven, who was frantically taking notes. Subject displaying pack protection behaviors. Suggest we proceed with caution. The next hour was possibly the most absurd of my entire life, which is saying something considering I once got drunk with a Centaurian and woke up on a mining asteroid with no memory in someone else's pants. But watching Rundle's security team round up every human on Zenith 7 for emergency tattoo screening reached new heights of bureaucratic insanity. They brought in Tasha Wong. First, Tasha was a mechanic, barely 5 feet tall, with bright purple hair and a full sleeve of flowers on her left arm. Roses, lilies, cherry blossoms, the whole garden. She walked into the medical bay chewing gum and looking annoyed. "This better be quick," she said. "I've got 3 busted coolant systems and a gravity generator that's making sounds like a dying whale." Dr. Cliven scanned her arm. The device immediately started screaming again. "Vegetation conquest symbols detected," the scanner announced. "Territorial dominance display, category, environmental subjugation." Tasha looked at her flower tattoos, then at Dr. Cliven. Then at me. "Are you kidding me right now? You have marked yourself with the defeated flora of your planet," Dr. Cliven said, his voice barely a whisper. "Vegetation conquest. This indicates a species that has achieved such complete dominance over their ecosystem that they celebrate it with permanent body markings." "They're flowers," Tasha shouted. "Pretty flowers, because I like flowers." "Noted. Subject admits to appreciation of conquered life forms," Rundle said. Then they brought in Roger Donnelly, who everyone called Brick, because he had the approximate intelligence and build of a concrete block. Brick was a loading dock supervisor with arms like tree trunks and a complete lack of what most people would call tactical awareness. He had barbed wire tattooed around both biceps. The scanner took one look at Brick and promptly triggered a station-wide alert. Alarms blared. Emergency lights flashed. Somewhere. I heard bulkhead doors slamming shut. Restraint device markings detected. The scanner shrieked. "Subject has survived captivity. Extreme danger. Recommend immediate containment." "It's barbed wire," Brick said slowly, genuinely confused. "It looks tough. Makes my muscles look bigger." 3 security guards rushed in with plasma nets. This was getting out of hand. Within 20 minutes, the medical bay looked like a really weird police lineup. There were 8 humans on Zenith 7, and now all 8 of us were standing against the wall while Dr. Cliven, Rundle, and half the security team stared at us like we were unexploded bombs. The other aliens on the station were pressing their faces against the observation window, watching the proceedings with the kind of morbid curiosity usually reserved for disaster footage. "This is discriminatory," Tasha said, arms crossed. "You can't just round up an entire species because you don't understand basic body art." "We can when that species has been systematically marking themselves with violence indicators," Rundle bubbled. He was consulting a datapad that kept updating with new information, none of it good for us. "The station AI has begun compiling a database of human cultural practices. The findings are deeply concerning." "Oh, this should be good," I muttered. Dr. Cliven pulled up a holographic display. Images of humans throughout history flickered in the air. Warriors with face paint, tribes with elaborate tattoos, soldiers with unit insignias, modern people with everything from butterflies to full-body art. "We have documented evidence that humans have been marking their bodies for over 5,000 standard years. Tribal affiliations, battle honors, territorial claims, religious devotion to war deities. That's not what those are," I said. "The Maori people of Earth, Dr. Cliven continued, ignoring me, marked their faces with permanent war patterns called moko. The Vikings recorded their conquests on their skin. The Japanese Yakuza displayed their criminal affiliations with elaborate full-body illustrations. Ancient Egyptians marked themselves with symbols of their gods, many of whom were associated with war and death." "You're taking everything out of context," Tasha protested. "Context," Rundle repeated. "Very well. Explain the context of this." He pulled up an image of a typical tattoo parlor, complete with buzzing machines and someone wincing in a chair. "Our research indicates that humans voluntarily subject themselves to repeated puncture wounds, injecting foreign pigments into their dermis, for purely aesthetic purposes. You inflict pain on yourselves for decoration." The other aliens in the observation area made sounds of distress. A flittering from Nebula 9 actually fainted. Brick raised his hand like we were in school. "To be fair, it does hurt pretty bad. I almost cried during my second session." "Not helping, Brick," all 7 of us said in unison. "Voluntary pain for aesthetic purposes indicates a species with extraordinarily high pain tolerance." Dr. Cliven was taking notes again, his 3 eyes gleaming with what I can only describe as scientific horror. Cross-referencing with the Galactic database. The only other species known to voluntarily undergo pain for non-medical purposes are the warlords of Kraxon 5, who ritually scar themselves before battle. "We also pierce our ears," someone said. I think it was Davis, a cargo supervisor who was apparently trying to make things worse. "And noses, and tongues, and other places." The observation window exploded with gasps and horrified chittering. You puncture your sensory organs, Rundle said flatly. For fashion, Davis added helpfully. I'm going to kill you, Tasha hissed at him. Threat detected, the medical scanner announced. It's a figure of speech, Tasha yelled. Dr. Cliven was spiraling now, pulling up more and more research on his displays. Human cultural practices include face painting for intimidation purposes, referred to colloquially as makeup. Hair removal and styling to indicate tribal affiliation, called haircuts. Metal insertion through body parts as status symbols, known as piercings. Clothing designed to enhance physical intimidation, including items called leather jackets and combat boots. Those are just clothes, I said weakly. And humans engage in ritualized combat for entertainment, Rundle added, reading from his datapad. Boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts. You watch your own species fight each other and consider it recreation. We also watch baking shows, I offered, in which you expose food to extreme heat until it submits to your desired form, Dr. Cliven said. Culinary dominance displays. There was no winning this argument. Every single aspect of human culture, when viewed through the lens of paranoid aliens with no context, sounded absolutely terrifying. I watched Dr. Cliven pull up images of Halloween, Christmas, and someone's birthday party. And somehow he managed to make all of them look like evidence of a warrior death cult. The humans celebrate something called Halloween where they dress as the dead and demand tribute from their neighbors, Dr. Cliven explained to Rundle. Failure to provide tribute results in tricks, which our translation algorithms suggest means retaliatory pranks or minor destruction of property. It's candy, Tasha shouted. We give kids candy. You use your offspring to collect tribute, Rundle noted. And this Christmas's celebration, Dr. Cliven continued, involves a figure who breaks into homes through thermal exhaust ports, judges whether individuals have been good or bad, and delivers rewards or punishments accordingly. He maintains a list. He checks it. Twice. He knows when you are sleeping. Okay, that one does sound creepy when you say it like that. Brick admitted. The station's AI chimed in, its pleasant voice completely at odds with what it was saying. Additional research indicates that humans engage in voluntary chemical alteration of consciousness through substances called alcohol, caffeine, and something called energy drinks. They operate heavy machinery and make important decisions while under the influence of these substances. You're all drinking coffee right now, I pointed out, gesturing to the 3 security guards, who were indeed holding coffee cups from the station's cafeteria. We adopted it from you, Rundle said. We thought it was safe. Are you telling us it's a combat stimulant? It's a survival tool, I said. Completely different. How is that different? I didn't have a good answer for that. Admiral Plorv arrived then, floating into the medical bay on his anti-gravity platform. Plorv was a Medusian, which meant he looked like a jellyfish that had been stretched to about 6 feet tall and given diplomatic credentials. His translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that indicated mood, and right now those patterns were flashing the color equivalent of extremely annoyed. Would someone please explain? Plorv's voice resonated through a translator embedded in his platform. Why I have received 17 emergency reports about human predators, 3 requests to evacuate non-essential personnel, and 1 suggestion that we jettison the entire human population into space? The humans have been concealing their warrior classification, Rundle said. They bear permanent kill marks and engage in cultural practices consistent with apex predator species. Plorv's bioluminescence shifted to something that looked like exasperation. They have tattoos, Rundle. You knew? Dr. Cliven looked betrayed. Of course I knew. I've been commanding stations with human crew for 6 years. They're harmless. Harmless, Rundle repeated, pulling up an image on his datapad. Now, is this human harmless? It was a picture of a UFC fighter mid-punch, all muscles and fury and aggression. That's literally his job, I said. And this? Rundle showed an image of a human soldier in full combat gear. Different job, also fairly specific to certain situations. And this? It was a picture of a kindergarten teacher. How is that threatening? Tasha asked. She is surrounded by 30 small humans and appears to be maintaining order through sheer force of will, Rundle said. The caption indicates she does this for 9 months of every year. That level of patience and control suggests extensive tactical training. Admiral Plorv's bioluminescence flickered through what I'd learned was the Medusian equivalent of a deep sigh. We need to convene an emergency council. If we're reclassifying humans, there are protocols to follow and treaties to consider. Until then, all humans are restricted to their quarters. Restricted, I said. For how long? Until we determine whether you're a threat to station security. But I have a shipment of mood crystals. The crystals will have to wait, Plorv said. This is a matter of galactic safety. As security escorted us out, I caught Tasha's eye. She looked as tired as I felt. This is the dumbest thing that's ever happened to me, she said. Same. I agreed. Behind us, I could hear Dr. Cliven and Rundle already diving deeper into human cultural research, their voices carrying down the corridor. This was going to get so much worse before it got better. They kept us in our quarters for 6 hours while the station's AI compiled what it cheerfully called a comprehensive analysis of human behavioral patterns. Staring at the ceiling, and wondering if it was too late to change careers, maybe I could become a hermit on some backwater moon where nobody cared about tattoos or cultural context. The door chimed. I opened it to find Tasha holding her datapad, her expression somewhere between furious and hysterical. You need to see what they're publishing on the station network, she said, shoving the screen at me. It was a document titled Human Threat Assessment, a Preliminary Report. I started reading, and immediately regretted it. The AI had taken every aspect of human culture and interpreted it through the most paranoid lens possible. According to the report, humans were a species of dormant berserkers who had spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of creative violence. We marked our bodies to track our victories. We decorated our living spaces with trophy displays called art. We formed pack bonds so strong that we'd die for each other, which the AI noted was tactically advantageous but emotionally disturbing. Listen to this part, Tasha said, scrolling down. Human infants are born completely helpless and require years of intensive care, yet the species continues to reproduce in vast numbers. This suggests either extraordinary optimism or a complete disregard for resource management. Both traits are consistent with predator psychology. That's just called having kids, I said. It gets worse. They found out about sports. She pulled up a section about human competitive activities. The AI had concluded that humans engaged in ritualized warfare as entertainment, with elaborate rules to prevent actual death, but still allowing for significant physical trauma. It listed football, hockey, rugby, and somehow also competitive eating as examples of human aggression displays. They think hot dog eating contests are violence, Tasha said. To be fair, watching someone eat 70 hot dogs is kind of violent. My datapad pinged with a station-wide announcement. Admiral Plorv was convening an emergency council meeting, and it was being broadcast live to all personnel. Whether we wanted to watch our species get reclassified as a galactic threat or not, we were going to see it happen. I pulled up the feed. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every major species on the station. Admiral Plorv floated at the center, his bioluminescence pulsing in steady diplomatic patterns. Dr. Cliven and Rundle were presenting their findings, and judging by the reactions, it wasn't going well for humanity. Humans practice something called tanning. Dr. Cliven was saying, in which they deliberately expose themselves to radiation that damages their cellular structure, because they find the resulting discoloration aesthetically pleasing. A crystalline delegate made a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. They harm themselves for beauty? Repeatedly, Dr. Cliven confirmed. They also inject toxins into their faces to paralyze muscles, creating what they call a youthful appearance. The toxin is called botulinum, and it is one of the most lethal substances known to Earth biology. In very small doses it's fine, I said to my empty room, knowing nobody could hear me. Rundle took over the presentation. Our analysis of human history reveals a species that has been in a constant state of warfare for its entire recorded existence. They have developed thousands of unique methods for combat, ranging from hand-to-hand techniques to weapons capable of destroying entire planets. We don't have planet-destroying weapons, Tasha said to her screen. Nuclear weapons, Rundle continued, as if he'd heard her. Chemical weapons, biological weapons, weapons that exist purely to counter other weapons. They even develop something called mutually assured destruction, in which they threaten to annihilate themselves if anyone attacked them. The council chamber erupted in confused chatter. A hive mind representative spoke up, their collective voice echoing. They threatened suicide as a defensive strategy? It worked, Rundle said. No major nuclear war has occurred since the doctrine was established. Because it's insane, the hive mind said. Exactly, Rundle agreed. Humans leverage insanity as a tactical advantage. Admiral Plorov tried to restore order, his bioluminescence flashing in the pattern for "please calm down," but the council was spiraling. A vaporous delegate from the Andromeda sector was insisting that humans be quarantined to their home system. A military advisor from the Crab Nebula was suggesting that humanity might be useful as shock troops in territorial disputes. Everyone was talking at once. Dr. Cliven pulled up historical images. Ancient Roman gladiators, medieval knights, samurai warriors, modern soldiers. Every single image carefully selected to make humans look as aggressive as possible. They romanticize warfare, Dr. Cliven explained. Their literature, their films, their music, all celebrate combat and survival against impossible odds. They have an entire genre of entertainment called action movies, in which a single human defeats dozens or hundreds of enemies through a combination of violence and improbable luck. Those aren't real, I shouted at my screen. And yet humans watch them for pleasure, Rundle added. They enjoy witnessing hypothetical scenarios in which their species demonstrates superior combat capabilities. This is aspirational violence. Tasha's voice came through my door calm. Jake, are you watching this? Unfortunately, they're going to reclassify us. We're going to be registered as a warrior species. Do you know what that means? Different visa requirements, trade restrictions. Some stations won't even let us dock. Maybe we can appeal, I said, not believing it. On the screen, Admiral Plorov was calling for a preliminary vote on human reclassification. The council was leaning toward yes, not because they thought humans were actively dangerous, but because the evidence, stripped of all context and filtered through xenophobia and bureaucratic panic, made us look like we were one bad day away from conquering the galaxy. Before we vote, Admiral Plorov said, his bioluminescence flickering with what I recognized as hope. Does anyone have evidence that humans are not a warrior species? Silence. Nobody spoke up. I slumped back on my bunk, staring at my tattoos. The tribal pattern that meant nothing except I'd been young and wanted to look cool. The dragon that I'd gotten because I'd always loved fantasy stories. The compass that pointed to a home I rarely got to visit anymore. The mountains that reminded me of my dad, who'd been an accountant and never fought anyone in his entire life. We weren't warriors. We were just people who marked ourselves because we liked art. Because we wanted to remember. Because sometimes we made impulsive decisions that seemed meaningful at the time. But try explaining that to a council of aliens who'd just spent 6 hours learning about every violent thing humanity had ever done. The vote was about to happen. And then every alarm on the station started screaming at once. The alarms weren't the standard medical bay false alarm variety. These were the genuine, hull breach imminent, everyone panic now alarms that you never actually wanted to hear. My datapad lit up with emergency notifications, and through my door I could hear boots pounding down corridors as security rushed to their stations. I pulled up the station feed just in time to see Admiral Plorov's bioluminescence flash through about 6 different colors of alarm. All council members to emergency shelters. We have hostile vessels approaching. Configuration matches the Skrit rating packs. Oh, perfect, I muttered. The Skrit were basically space weasels with delusions of adequacy. They weren't particularly dangerous individually, more annoying than threatening, but they traveled in packs and had a habit of hitting stations when they were desperate. And apparently, right now they were very desperate. My door chimed. Tasha was there, still holding her datapad. We're not going to the shelters, are we? Do you want to hide while the station gets torn apart? Not particularly. We found Brick in the corridor, looking confused but ready. Security said to stay in quarters, but the alarms say run. Which do we do? Neither, I said. We're going to the docking bays. The 3 of us made it to Bay 7 just as the first Skrit boarding pod punched through the outer docking clamp. Security was already there, plasma rifles raised, but they looked about as combat-ready as a group of accountants holding Nerf guns. Rundle was shouting orders that nobody seemed to be following, his slug body quivering with stress. The boarding pod door exploded open, and a dozen Skrit poured out, chattering and waving plasma cutters that doubled as weapons. They were about 4 feet tall, covered in matted fur, and smelled like wet garbage. Their leader, wearing a bandolier made of stolen electronics, screeched something that the translators rendered as, "Surrender resources, or face destruction." Rundle's security team froze. Literally froze. They just stood there, weapons raised but not firing, caught in the bureaucratic nightmare of not having proper authorization to discharge weapons at boarding parties. "Oh, for the love of..." Tasha muttered, and walked straight toward the Skrit. "Tasha!" I hissed, but she was already moving. "Hey!" she shouted at the raiders. "You picked the wrong day and the wrong station." The Skrit leader turned to her, plasma cutter humming. Small human. You threaten us? No, Tasha said. I'm going to offer you a better deal. And just like that, the dynamic shifted. Not because Tasha was threatening them, but because she was talking to them like they were rational beings having a bad time. Which, it turned out, they were. The Skrit weren't raiding for fun. Their supply lines had been cut off by a corporate merger that had left 3 colonies without food shipments. They were stealing because they were starving. While Tasha negotiated, Brick was doing what Brick did best, solving problems with brute force applied thoughtfully. He'd climbed into his cargo loader, the massive mechanical suit he used for moving freight containers, and was using it to manually seal the breach in the docking clamp that the Skrit had blown open. No weapons, no violence, just practical problem-solving with heavy machinery. I found myself at a console, rerouting the station's traffic control to lock down the other docking bays before more Skrit could board. It was basic stuff, the kind of work I did every day as a cargo hauler, but apparently watching a human multitask under pressure was giving Dr. Cliven heart palpitations across his 3-chambered circulatory system. You're not fighting them. Doctor. Cliven's voice came through the station calm, bewildered. Why would we fight them? Why? Tasha called back, still negotiating with the Skrit leader. Fighting is expensive and someone gets hurt. This is better. Within 20 minutes, the situation was resolved. Not through violence, but through the most human solution possible. We made a deal. The station had excess food supplies that were going to expire anyway. The Skrit had salvaged components that the engineering department needed. Tasha brokered a trade agreement on the spot. Brick physically moved the cargo using his loader, and I processed the paperwork through the station's bureaucracy faster than anyone thought possible. The Skrit left with full cargo holds and a promise to return as legitimate traders instead of raiders. The station's hull was patched. Nobody died. Nobody even got seriously injured. Unless you counted the security guard who'd sprained his ankle running to the shelter. Admiral Plorv arrived at the docking bay just as the last Skrit vessel disengaged. His bioluminescence was flickering through colors I'd never seen before, which I assumed meant something like profoundly confused. You negotiated with raiders, he said. They weren't really raiders, Tasha said. They were just desperate. Big difference. You used a cargo loader as an emergency repair tool, Plorv said to Brick. Brick shrugged. It loads cargo. It loads hull patches. Same principle. And you navigated our bureaucratic systems under combat stress conditions, Plorv said to me. I fill out customs forms for a living, I said. This was basically the same thing with more alarms. Dr. Cliven appeared behind the Admiral, all 3 eyes wide. The kill marks, he said quietly. They're not kill marks at all. We've been trying to tell you that, I said. No, I mean, they are marks. But not of killing. They're marks of survival, of memory, of coping with mortality through art and humor, and permanent reminders that you existed, that you mattered, that you survived another day in a universe that tried to kill you. Rundle oozed forward, his eye stalks focused on the departing Skrit vessels. You didn't fight them. You could have. The tactical advantage was yours. But you didn't. Fighting is what you do when talking fails, Tasha said. Talking hadn't failed yet. Admiral Plorv's bioluminescence settled into a warm, steady glow. I need to reconvene the council. The emergency council meeting reconvened exactly 1 hour later, but the mood had shifted completely. The delegates who'd been calling for human quarantine were now quietly reviewing the footage of what had happened in the docking bay. Admiral Plorv floated at the center of the chamber, his bioluminescence displaying what I'd learned was diplomatic satisfaction. Let the record show, Plorv announced, that during a hostile boarding action, human personnel resolved the situation without firing a single shot, prevented significant station damage, and established a new trade relationship with a previously antagonistic species. This was accomplished through negotiation, creative problem-solving, and what I can only describe as aggressive optimism. Dr. Cliven stood to address the council, looking significantly more humble than he had 6 hours ago. I owe the humans an apology. My analysis was technically accurate but fundamentally wrong. Yes, they mark their bodies. Yes, they have a violent history. Yes, they engage in behaviors that seem contradictory and occasionally insane. But these traits do not make them warriors. They make them survivors. Survivors, who voluntarily inject toxins into their faces, the crystalline delegate pointed out. To feel better about themselves, Dr. Cliven said. That's not predator behavior, that's deeply relatable insecurity combined with questionable decision-making. Half this council has done something similar. Several delegates looked away uncomfortably. Rundle spoke next, his voice bubbling with what might have been respect. Humans do not seek violence. They seek solutions. Violence is merely one tool in a vast toolkit that includes negotiation, bribery, improvisation, stubbornness, and something they call winging it. Today we learned that a human's first instinct when facing armed raiders is not to fight, but to ask why they're raiding and whether there's a better option. The tattoos. A hive mind delegate asked. Enzaxt. If they're not kill marks, what are they? Admiral Plorv pulled up an image of my arm, the tribal pattern visible in high definition. Human Jake, would you explain this marking? I was suddenly very aware that the entire council was staring at me through the video feed. I got it when I was 22, I said. I'd just lost my first real job. My girlfriend had left me. And I felt like I had no control over anything. So I walked into a tattoo parlor and got something permanent. Something that was mine, that nobody could take away. It hurt, but it was a hurt I chose. And afterward, I felt better. Not because it meant anything profound, but because I'd made a decision and followed through with it. Silence in the council chamber. That's it? Dr. Cliven asked. No deeper meaning? No warrior tradition? Sometimes humans do things just to feel like we have some control over our lives, I said. The universe is big and scary, and we're tiny and mortal. So we mark ourselves, we tell stories, we make art, we laugh at things that should terrify us. It's how we cope. Tasha leaned into the frame. Also, sometimes we just think dragons look cool. Dragons do look cool, Brick added helpfully. Admiral Plorv's bioluminescence rippled with what I was now certain was amusement. I motioned that humans not be reclassified as a warrior species, but rather acknowledged as what they truly are. A species of creative problem solvers with concerning pain tolerance and questionable aesthetic choices. I second that motion, Dr. Cliven said immediately. The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, I was back in the medical bay for my actual health screening, the one that had been interrupted by the great tattoo panic. Dr. Cliven approached with his bioscanner, then paused and carefully set it. Aside. I think we can skip the detailed scan this time, he said. Probably for the best. I agreed. He picked up a more traditional diagnostic tool and ran it over my arm without incident. Your file indicates you're considering another tattoo. Thinking about it, I said. Maybe something to commemorate this whole ridiculous situation. What would it be? I'm thinking a small spaceship, or maybe a medical scanner with a red X through it. All three of Dr. Cliven's eyes crinkled in what might have been a smile. If you do get another marking, I request that you not come to this medical bay for at least a month afterward. My cardiovascular system needs time to recover. Deal. As I left the medical bay, I passed a bulletin board where station announcements were posted. Someone had added a new designation to the species classification chart. Under Homo sapiens, where it used to say unclassified, it now read, harmlessly dangerous, approach with caution and sense of humor. I could live with that. My datapad pinged with a message from the docking authority. The Arcturian mood crystals had finally been cleared for delivery, only 3 days late. The crystals themselves had filed a formal complaint about the delay, which was apparently something mood crystals could do when they got cranky enough. I headed to my ship, passing Tasha in the corridor. She was covered in grease and looked exhausted but satisfied. Fix the gravity generator, she said. Turns out it was making dying whale sounds because someone had installed it upside down. How do you install a gravity generator upside down? Very carefully and very incorrectly. We laughed, and I realized that somewhere in the last 72 hours, humanity had gone from being an unknown cargo-hauling species to being the station's unofficial problem solvers. Not because we were warriors or predators or apex anythings, but because when things went wrong, humans had a tendency to look at the situation, say, something like, well, that's stupid. And then fix it through a combination of stubbornness, creativity, and refusing to accept that problems couldn't be solved. My tattoos were still just tattoos. My coffee was still probably going to kill me eventually. And the universe was still big and scary and full of things that didn't understand humans. But at least now they knew we weren't trying to kill them. We were just trying to survive with style, terrible decision-making skills, and the occasional commemorative body art. And honestly, that was the most human thing possible.